The stars above the dark edge of the galaxy flickered like distant candles as the silent signal began. It wasn't a sound, it wasn't a message. It was a pulse that stretched through the void, steady and cold. Every station near the outer rim detected it at the same moment. Alarms blared, technicians shouted, and yet no one could explain what they were hearing. The signal carried no coordinates, no voice, just a heartbeat from the unknown. Commander Rylan stood at the window of his cruiser, his green eyes locked on the black horizon of space. "Report," he ordered sharply. A young officer's hands trembled over the console. "Sir, the signal is repeating every 30 seconds. It's growing stronger," she whispered. Another officer turned pale. "It's coming from the dark zone, the area beyond mapped space." The bridge fell silent. No one liked to talk about that place. It was empty, it was forgotten, and nothing ever came back from there. The Council fleet dispatched more ships to the edge, but even their strongest sensors couldn't pierce the void. "What's out there?" Rylan muttered. His second-in-command, a tall creature with silver skin, shook her head slowly. "Whatever it is, it's moving," the crew stiffened. "What?" he demanded. "The signal isn't just growing louder," she replied, her voice thin. "It's closing the distance. Something's coming toward us." Hours passed, but the pulse never changed its rhythm. It was calm, patient, and relentless, like a knock on a locked door that would not stop. Outposts along the rim began shutting down their external beacons. Some ships fled without orders. "We're picking up shadows," an operator stammered. "Something big." The scanners struggled to capture its size, but the numbers on the screen kept rising. "That can't be right," someone whispered. Rylan paced across the bridge, his boots echoing against the metal floor. "Send a drone," he ordered. "I want eyes on that object," the drone launched, cutting through the darkness. The signal grew louder as it approached, and then the feed went black. "We lost it," the tech officer said in a shaking voice. A thin line of static echoed through the speakers, followed by a low hum that made everyone's chest tighten. "Turn it off!" someone shouted. But the sound wasn't coming from their systems anymore. It was vibrating through the hull itself. "This isn't natural," the science officer whispered. Rylan clenched his jaw. "Raise the shields." The dark edge of space shimmered like oil on water, and then the stars vanished. Something blocked the light. It wasn't an asteroid, it wasn't a station. It was something alive, or at least something built. The size of it swallowed their scanners whole. "Sir," the communications officer said in a broken voice, "it's right in front of us." The viewport filled with blackness. At first it seemed like space itself had cracked open. Then faint lines of pale light appeared across the surface of the thing. Symbols, unfamiliar but precise. "What is that?" The silver-skinned officer breathed. No one answered. The bridge lights flickered as a new sound filled the air. It was soft, slow, like a voice too big to belong to any single being. "Hello," it said. In their language, the crew froze. Did it just speak? The young officer whispered, "How does it know our language?" Rylan demanded, but before anyone could respond, the lights went out completely. For 3 seconds, the entire ship hung in perfect darkness. When the lights returned, every system on the console displayed the same single word: "Observe." "Commander," the tech officer gasped. "It's inside our systems. No firewall, no lock. Nothing works." Outside the ship, the massive structure began to shift. It wasn't a fleet. It was one single ship, larger than any orbital city. Its engines made no sound. Its weapons were invisible. Its presence alone crushed the air in their lungs. "Send a message to the Council," Rylan ordered. "Tell them it's here." But as the message was sent, the reply came back before the signal could even leave the system. "We know," the message read. "We see it too." The unknown ship wasn't alone anymore. Fleets from dozens of alien worlds surrounded the region, waiting, watching, afraid to make the first move. "Why hasn't it attacked?" the silver-skinned officer asked. "Because it doesn't need to," Rylan answered quietly. He felt it deep in his bones. Whoever they were not here to talk, not to trade, not to beg. They were here to show something far more powerful than force. Suddenly the pulse stopped. The silence was worse. It pressed against the walls, against their skin, against their thoughts. "This is wrong," the young officer whispered. Her fingers shook as she reached for the controls. "This isn't a weapon. It's a warning." The stars flickered once more, and for a moment every ship, every station, every sensor across the rim went blind. When vision returned, the massive structure was gone. The signal had vanished, but the pulse still lived in their bones like a memory carved in metal. Ryland stared at the empty void and whispered, "It was watching us." The council would later say it was only a test, a first knock at the door. But for those who saw the shadow that night, they knew it wasn't a test. It was a message. Humanity had returned, and the stars would never feel safe again. The council hall had never been this loud. Voices from 100 worlds clashed under the dome like crashing storms. Holograms of fleets flickered above the round table, and data streams poured in faster than anyone could read them. Every delegate spoke at once, fear and confusion twisting their calm faces into panic. They had all received the same report: an unknown ship, a signal from the edge, and then silence. Chancellor Vrayan struck the table with his staff, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "Order!" he shouted. The voices fell, but the fear didn't. "We have confirmation," Vrayan said slowly. "Something entered our border space. Something that moved like nothing we've ever seen." An old delegate from the Thracian Republic leaned forward, his dark eyes sharp. "We have faced threats before," he said. "Pirate lords, lost fleets, even the burning swarm. But this is different. The signal bypassed our defenses. The object was invisible to our sensors, and then it simply vanished." "It didn't vanish," another delegate hissed. "It left because it wanted to. That's worse." The room tensed. No one willing to speak the fear they all shared. "If it can come and go without being stopped," one young diplomat whispered, "then it can return whenever it wants." General Olar of the Council Fleet slammed his fist on the table. "Enough talk of fear," he growled. His armor clinked as he rose to his full height. "We must mobilize every battle group, lock the borders, and prepare for war. No unknown vessel enters our territory without consequence." A ripple of voices followed. Some agreed, some protested. Vren narrowed his eyes. "General, this thing is unlike any fleet we've seen. Our ships couldn't track it, our defenses couldn't touch it. A war against a shadow is no war at all. It's suicide." Ola's jaw tightened. "Then we learned to strike the shadow." At the edge of the chamber, a quiet voice broke through the noise. It belonged to Envoy Serin, a small figure with sharp silver hair and a calm, piercing gaze. "You're all assuming it wants war," she said. "But what if this isn't an attack? What if it's a message?" "A message?" The Thracian delegate snapped. "A message that freezes every ship, shuts down our systems, and walks through our defenses like they're nothing. That's not a message, that's a warning." Serin didn't flinch. "And warnings mean one thing, that whoever sent it has no need to negotiate." For a moment, no one spoke outside the windows of the hall. The stars drifted quietly, indifferent to their fear. Then a guard entered the chamber in a rush. His armor scratched, his voice shaking. "High Chancellor," he gasped, "we just received another signal." Every head turned. Vrayan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Where?" "Not where," the guard replied, "everywhere." The chamber lights dimmed as the council's central display lit up. Hundreds of systems flashed red. The signal had spread to every major fleet beacon at the same second. The pulse was no longer coming from the edge. It was inside their own space. "They're in our systems," someone muttered. "They're everywhere," Olar barked orders. "Seal the networks, shut down comm relays. Don't let it through." Technicians worked frantically, but the signal didn't slow. It was like water spilling through cracks they didn't know existed. Suddenly, every screen went black. A voice filled the chamber, soft and cold. Speaking in the common tongue, "Do not follow us," it said. "Observe. And remember." Delegates clutched the edges of their seats, some whispering prayers, others cursing under their breath. The voice faded, but the silence it left behind was worse. "Who are they?" someone whispered. No one answered. The Thracian delegate rose again, his voice sharp and angry now. "If they can enter our space this easily, they can destroy us," he spat, "and we're sitting here talking." Like children. Saren's voice cut through the heat like a blade. "You're wrong," she said. "Children panic, but predators, they wait." "What are you suggesting?" Brian asked. "That whoever sent that message isn't afraid of us," she replied. "They're warning us because they can. Because they already hold the advantage. We're not in control here." "They are." General Olar stepped forward, the lines on his face deepening. "Then we make them fear us." Vrain's expression darkened. "And how, General, do we make something fear us? When it walks through our walls like smoke?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. No one had an answer. They could mobilize fleets, raise shields, or build walls. But against something that didn't need doors, what good were walls? As the council adjourned, silent and broken, Saren remained in her seat. Her eyes stayed fixed on the star map. The same map now marked by a single glowing symbol. No one knew what it meant, but deep inside, she did not believe this was random. It wasn't a threat thrown into the void. It was carefully placed, precise, intentional, in the dark outside their borders. Something ancient moved again, unseen but felt. And for the first time in centuries, the great powers of the galaxy realized they were not the Watchers anymore. They were the ones being watched. The fear that began as a signal had now reached their hearts, and none of them could unhear that voice. "Observe and remember," it had said. Saren whispered to the stars. "We've already been chosen." The defense line stretched across the border of council space like a wall of steel. Hundreds of warships floated in the darkness, their engines silent, their weapons armed. The stars ahead looked calm, but every captain on those ships knew something was coming. They didn't know what or when or how, but the memory of that pulse still echoed in their bones. Commander Rylan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the void beyond. "No movement yet?" he asked. His officer shook her head. "Nothing, sir." "It's too quiet." Rylan narrowed his eyes. He hated quiet. Quiet meant something was waiting. Around him, crews worked in silence. Every console, every scanner was locked on deep space. It had been 10 hours since the last signal, but no one relaxed. They had seen what the unknown ship could do, and they knew it didn't need to make noise to bring fear. "Open channel to the fleet," Rylan ordered. His voice carried through the comms. "All ships stay alert. No one fires without my command." A chorus of acknowledgements followed. Suddenly the lights on the bridge flickered. A chill ran down everyone's spine. "Sir," the communications officer said, her voice tight. "We're picking up something." "Location?" Rylan demanded. The officer stared at her screen, her eyes wide. "Everywhere," she whispered. "It's the same signal, the same pulse. But it's not coming from one point this time. It's surrounding us." The main viewport dimmed as the void shifted. It was like watching ink spread through water. Blackness folded on itself. And then it appeared, one single ship, larger than a fortress, sliding out of the dark like a predator stepping into the light. Its hull was smooth and black, etched with faint glowing lines that pulsed like veins. "Contact confirmed," the sensor officer said, his voice breaking. "Size? Unknown. It's bigger than any dreadnought we've ever recorded." Rylan stepped closer to the viewport. His reflection shook in the glass. "So this is them," he muttered, across the fleet. Captains whispered into their comms. "That's one ship." "Are our scanners broken?" "How is it this big?" "Get me a signal lock," Rylan ordered. The communications officer's hands flew over the controls. "I'm trying, but sir, it's rejecting our scans. Our systems can't read it." The ship floated closer. Silent, calm, and terrifying. It didn't aim weapons. It didn't broadcast threats. It just existed. And that alone felt like enough to crush the air out of their lungs. "Sir, incoming transmission," the officer whispered. "From who?" She swallowed. "From them." The bridge fell silent. Then a voice filled the air. It was smooth, calm, and spoke in perfect common language. "This is humanity, stand by." Every officer froze. Rylan felt his heart pound like war drums in his chest. Humanity. No one in the galaxy had ever heard of such a species. No records, no star maps, no encounters. And yet this voice spoke as if it belonged here. "What's your demand?" Rylan said into the comm. His voice was steady. But his hands weren't. The voice didn't answer. The ship remained still, its dark surface reflecting starlight like a mirror. And then, without warning, every ship in the defense line felt a jolt. Consoles flashed, power dimmed, shields blinked offline. "They're inside our systems!" the tech officer shouted. "They've bypassed everything." "Raise emergency barriers," Rylan ordered. "We can't," she cried. "They control everything." On the viewport, the massive ship opened what looked like a hangar door. Inside were thousands of smaller crafts, sharp, silent and old. They didn't look like the sleek designs of the council fleets. They looked older, heavier. But there was precision in their formation that made seasoned captains sweat. "They're launching fighters," an officer whispered. "But they're not attacking." The fighters formed a wide circle. Surrounding the entire fleet, it wasn't an assault, it was a cage. "They're showing us their power," Rylan said quietly. "Sir, what do we do?" He exhaled slowly. "We wait on one of the ships in the outer ring." A young captain panicked. "We can't just let them box us in," he shouted to his crew. "Charge weapons." "Negative," Rylan barked into the comm. "Hold your fire," but the captain didn't listen. His ship's cannons glowed and released a single warning shot into the dark. The energy bolt hit the side of the Titan ship and disappeared like a raindrop on iron. The Titan didn't return fire. It simply turned slowly, deliberately, and faced the ship that fired. In that moment, every sensor screamed. The young captain's ship went completely dark. Lights out, engines off, weapons dead, no explosion, no scream, just silence. "They didn't destroy it," the officer whispered. "They—" "Shut it down," the Titan's voice returned. "Cold and steady. Stand by." The fleets didn't move. Rylan clenched his fists. He had fought pirates, invaders and warlords, but never something that didn't need to fight. They could end everything, and they knew it. Slowly the fighters pulled back. The hangar doors closed, and the Titan ship began to turn away. It didn't retreat fast. It drifted with calm purpose, like a beast that didn't fear being hunted. Rylan stared at the black shape fading into the void. "They didn't come to conquer," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "They came to show us we can't stop them," and in every ship across the defense line, captains and soldiers understood the same terrible truth. This wasn't an attack, it was a statement. Humanity had revealed itself, and they had all just witnessed the first glimpse of a power that could end the galaxy without firing a single shot. The fleet floated in the darkness like a wall of glass. Silent and fragile, the Titan ship hadn't fired a single shot, yet the entire defense line felt as if a blade was pressed against its throat. Commander Rylan stood rigid on the bridge, his hands locked behind his back. His crew barely breathed. The hum of failing systems the only sound in the room. "Status report," he said quietly. "Shields offline," the tech officer answered. "Weapons locked out. Engines at 30%. They control everything. Are they transmitting anything?" Rylan asked. The communications officer shook her head. "Nothing, sir. They're just waiting." Outside the viewport, the Titan warship floated with unnatural stillness. It didn't blink, it didn't flinch, it didn't show heat signatures like normal vessels. Its dark hull seemed to swallow light itself. Alien ships surrounding it shifted uneasily, the captain sending desperate messages through scrambled channels. "What are they doing?" One captain shouted through comms. "Why are they just sitting there?" "They don't need to move," another voice answered shakily. "They already won," Rylan cut into the line. "Everyone hold position. Do not provoke them." The moment he finished speaking, the Titan's hull began to glow faintly, thin lines of light crawling across its surface like living veins. "What is that?" His second-in-command whispered. "Why does it look like it's waking up?" A wave of static swept through the bridge. The lights flickered, screens glitched, and then, without warning, the hangar doors of the Titan opened. Thousands of small craft slipped out like shadows peeling from the dark. Each one was perfectly silent. They didn't broadcast, didn't register on radar, but they moved with surgical precision, surrounding the entire defense fleet in seconds. "They're not attacking," the officer said with a trembling voice. "They're positioning. Raise emergency barriers," Rylan ordered. Even though he knew the answer, already locked out, came the reply. The comm crackled with panicked voices. "We're boxed in. They're everywhere. Someone do something." One ship tried to shift formation, its engines flaring weakly, but the moment it moved, every single fighter rotated toward it like wolves scenting blood. "Stand down," Rylan barked. "Do not move unless I say so." The Titan ship pulsed once, a deep, low sound that wasn't just heard, it was felt, like the heartbeat of something far larger than metal. The entire fleet shuddered under the vibration. Some crew members covered their ears, others fell to their knees. "It's inside the hull," someone whispered. "The sound is inside the ship." "Sir," the communications officer gasped. "They're sending a signal again. Translate it," Rylan ordered. The officer swallowed hard as the voice filled the bridge. Calm and smooth, like it belonged to someone who had already won. "Do not interfere," the voice said. "Stand by." The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound. Across the fleet, captains exchanged terrified glances. They had no idea what the ship was capable of, but deep inside, every instinct told them it was beyond anything they'd ever faced. The Titan wasn't a warship in the way they understood it. It was something else, something built to control. Not destroy. Why don't they attack? Rylan's second-in-command asked, "Why are they giving us warnings?" Rylan stared at the massive ship and whispered, "Because they don't need to fight to win." Then the Titan moved. Not fast, not violently. It rotated slowly until its front faced the Council fleet. Every scanner went blind. Every sensor froze. The ship wasn't firing. It was scanning them layer by layer, peeling apart their technology like it was nothing. "They're reading everything," the tech officer shouted. "Every code, every engine, every shield system. They're taking it all." "Shut it down," Rylan ordered. "We can't, sir. They're already inside." Panic spread through the bridge like fire through dry grass. Soldiers whispered about evacuation. Some captains wanted to retreat, but retreat wasn't possible. Not against something that could shut down entire fleets with a pulse. Then something changed. The lights inside the Titan brightened. Its hangar fighters drifted backward in perfect formation, clearing the space between the two forces. For a moment, Rylan thought it was preparing to strike. He gripped the edge of the console, his jaw tight. "Here it comes," he muttered. But the attack never came. Instead, the Titan ship powered up its engines. The space around it twisted like water around a stone, and slowly it began to leave. It didn't rush, it didn't flee. It moved like a creature that owned the stars. "They're retreating." The second-in-command asked, stunned. "No," Rylan said. "They're showing us who's in control." As the ship vanished into the void, all systems slowly came back online. Shields hummed weakly, weapons reconnected, engines flickered to life, but the silence it left behind was worse than any battle. It wasn't victory, it was mercy, and everyone on that bridge knew it. "They could have destroyed us," the officer whispered. "Easily. They didn't need to," Rylan said, his voice cold and quiet. "This wasn't a fight. It was a message. Out in the darkness, the Titan ship was gone, but its presence lingered like a shadow too heavy to shake off. The Council fleets had faced war before, but this wasn't war. This was a reminder that something far older and far stronger was watching, and humanity had chosen to make itself known without lifting a single weapon. The Council chamber was silent, a silence that didn't come from peace, but from fear. Delegates who once shouted and argued now sat still, eyes fixed on the giant screen floating in the center of the room. The Titan ship had disappeared from their border hours ago, but its voice still echoed in their heads. It hadn't fired a single weapon, but it had left a scar on every mind that saw it. "Are we under occupation?" One delegate whispered, breaking the silence. Vrian, the High Chancellor, shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice low and uncertain. "They didn't take anything. They didn't have to," another delegate replied sharply. "They walked into our territory, disabled our fleets and left at their will. They don't need to conquer. They already proved they can if they want." On the far end of the chamber, Envoy Seren leaned forward, her silver hair falling across her shoulder. "We have to ask the real question," she said. "Why would someone with power like that just warn us? A murmur spread through the room. One of the older military leaders slammed his hand on the table. "It's a threat, nothing more," he growled. "They're saying we're here, and you can't stop us." Seren's voice remained calm. "Yes, but why speak at all? They could have destroyed the fleet. They could have erased us. Instead, they spoke. 2 words. 'Do not interfere,'" Vrain repeated softly. The image on the screen changed as a projection of the fleet encounter replayed. Black hull, glowing vanes, silent precision. The words appeared at the bottom in glowing white. "Do not interfere." The council members shifted uneasily. General Ola, still in his black uniform from the Fleet Command Center, stood. "We should prepare for war," he said coldly. "This species is a threat to everything we've built. If we show weakness now, they will return." "Return?" One delegate snapped. "You mean crush us?" Ola ignored the remark. "We need more ships, better weapons, countermeasures, against something that walks through our shields like smoke." Seren asked softly. "General, be honest, can we fight them?" Ola's jaw tightened. His silence was the answer. Vrain rose from his chair. "Listen to me," he said. "We're not dealing with a rogue faction or an empire looking for war. We're dealing with something that's beyond what we've ever known. They didn't invade. They sent a warning. They sent a threat," the military leader barked. "No," Vrain countered sharply. "A threat is meant to control. This is a boundary. They told us we're not to step." An officer from the intelligence division stepped forward. A data pad in his hand. "We analyzed the transmission," he began. "The origin was masked, but the language they used was clean, direct, not translated through any of our systems." "They knew our language," Seren said, her voice tightening. "That means they've been watching us longer than we thought." The room fell silent again. Only the faint hum of the chamber's energy field filled the air. The idea of being watched, not just now, but for years, maybe centuries, crawled under everyone's skin. What are they protecting? One delegate asked. Vrain stared at the glowing message on the screen. "Something called Earth," he said slowly. "That's what their transmission said. They warned us not to interfere with Earth." "Earth?" Someone repeated. "Where is that?" "Unknown," the intelligence officer admitted. "There's no record of any system with that name in council archives." General Olar frowned. "A species that powerful, hidden this long." "They were never lost. They were waiting. They want us to stay away," Seren said. "And if we don't?" Everyone knew the answer without speaking it. Outside the council hall, entire worlds were talking about the Titan. Civilians who saw the recordings whispered stories of a ghost ship, of a god made of iron. Entire defense networks were on high alert. But even the admirals who commanded them felt small. Back in the chamber, the debate shifted again. "We can't let them dictate our borders," Ola snapped. "If they have something they're protecting, we need to know what it is, or we could let them have it," Seren replied. "For once, maybe walking away is survival, not weakness. They'll see that as surrender," Ola shot back. "No," Vrain said firmly. "They'll see it as understanding." The chamber doors slid open suddenly. A young officer rushed in, his face pale. "Chancellor," he gasped. "Another signal this time." Inside council space, the screen flashed red. A small, glowing symbol replaced the replay of the Titan ship. It wasn't text, it wasn't language they knew, but it pulsed like a heartbeat. "What does it mean?" someone asked. "It's a location," the officer said weakly. "They've given us coordinates." Seren leaned forward. "A message after a warning," she whispered. "This isn't over." Every delegate stared at the pulsing symbol, their hearts beating with it. Humanity had not left the stage. They had just begun to speak, and whatever Earth was, the galaxy had just been given a line it was not meant to cross. The chamber lights dimmed as the pulsing symbol continued to glow on the central screen. Each pulse echoed softly through the room. Like a heartbeat no one could escape, delegates leaned forward in silence. Their faces pale, no one spoke, no one dared. This wasn't just a signal anymore. It was an invitation or a command. High Chancellor Vrain stood slowly, his robe brushing the polished floor. "They've given us coordinates," he said quietly. "But why?" General Olar crossed his arms, his voice low and sharp. Because they want us to follow. Seren's eyes stayed locked on the glowing pulse. Or they want to see if we're foolish enough to try, she murmured. A tension thicker than steel filled the air. They all remembered the Titan ship, its cold silence, the way it shut down entire fleets like toys. It hadn't needed to threaten. Its existence had been enough, do we respond? One delegate asked nervously, do we send a fleet? No, Vrain said, but Olar stepped forward, his boots ringing against the floor. If we stay silent, they'll see weakness, he argued. We need to show we're not afraid. They disabled our entire defense line without firing a single shot, Seren snapped. And you want to march straight to the place they told us not to touch? It's a trap, another voice whispered. Or a test, Olar said coldly. Silence fell again. Rayan turned toward the tactical display. A star map appeared, zooming in on a distant, uncharted region of space. The coordinates led to a system with no known colonies. No stations, nothing but black space and one faint star. Whoever they are, Seren said. They don't do things by accident. If we go there, we play their game. And we already know who wins. But the council was split. Half demanded strength, half whispered caution. In the end, fear of appearing weak won. 2 fleets were sent, 100 ships, hand-picked and armed with the best weapons the galaxy had. They moved through hyperspace like blades through water. The council chamber watched every feed in silence as the ships approached the unknown coordinates. Commander Rylin stood once again on his bridge, staring at the darkness ahead. We shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Orders are orders, his officer replied, but her voice held no confidence last time, Rylin muttered. We didn't even fire a shot. The fleet slowed as they entered the system. At first there was nothing, just cold black space and a pale sun. Then one by one, their scanners began to flicker. Static crept across every screen. We're losing sensors, someone said. Shields up, Rylin ordered, but the ship ignored him. Systems began to fail, the same way they had before. Communications fell silent, engines dimmed. The hum of the ship changed, deep and slow. They're here, Rylin whispered. The stars ahead seemed to bend, twisting like light around a massive object, and then it emerged. The Titan-class warship, bigger than before, its black surface reflected the dying sun like a mirror. Oh no, someone breathed. All ships hold position, Rylin ordered. But the Titan didn't move closer. Instead, a second light appeared. Faint at first, then growing brighter, a structure behind the Titan. No, not a structure, a world, a planet suspended in the dark, with glowing rings like silver around its blue surface. Is that? His officer whispered. Earth, Rylin said. The word felt heavy. The voice returned through every ship, soft and calm. You were told not to interfere. Across the fleet, officers froze. The message wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry, it was quiet, but it carried more weight than any threat ever could. General Ola, sitting in a command chair on the lead ship, clenched his fists. They think they can scare us, he hissed. Open fire! Rylin spun to his comms officer. Cancel that order, he barked. But it was too late. One ship fired. A bright beam shot across the void toward the Titan. The moment it touched the hull, it vanished like dust. Then the stars went black. Every ship in the fleet lost power in the same second. Consoles died, weapons went dark, engines fell silent. It was like someone had stolen the heartbeat of the entire armada. Sir, someone whispered in the darkness. They're inside everything, through the viewport. The Titan's lights burned brighter for a second. Everyone on board felt something, not a sound, not a word, but a pressure, like something looking back at them, something old. Something that had been waiting, and then the voice returned. Do not return. The fleet drifted powerless in the dark as the Titan and the planet behind it vanished in a ripple of light. One by one, their systems came back online. But the coordinates on their maps were gone, erased like they had never existed back at the council chamber. Faces were pale as the report came in. No damage, no casualties, no battle, just powerlessness. They erased the location. Vrain said softly. Even our records. They're protecting something, Seren whispered. And they're not asking for permission. Ola slammed his fist on the table. But even he couldn't hide the fear behind his anger. The council had seen power before, but never this kind. Humanity hadn't threatened them. Humanity had simply reminded them that some doors were not meant to be opened. As the night stretched over the stars, the entire galaxy understood. The Titan wasn't just a warship. It was a warning carved into the darkness. A single unspoken law now ruled the stars. Do not touch Earth, do not test humanity. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy obeyed in silence.